You Can Change the World, The Christopher Approach by James Keller. Chapter 7. Writing. The Power of Words. Before anything in this world is ever done, thought precedes the act. From the time Gutenberg first invented the printing press, well, it was being used in the Muslim world before that, and the Chinese seem to be the ones who invented it, but, and in increasingly higher proportion ever since, thoughts have nearly always been inspired by what someone put down in writing, in a newspaper, in a book, in a magazine, or in modern times, in motion pictures, radio, and television as well. Now, see, we could probably guess that the word inspiration sort of changed its popular usage from the religious sense to, you get an idea in a very mundane sort of way. I mean, even if it is transference of one idea from religious text to another, it's not the same thing as inspiration now, is it? In the old Greek-based way, but centuries ago, the chief means of spreading a thought, an idea, was by word of mouth, from a merchant to a customer, from a soldier to his family, from a trader in the marketplace to those grouped around to haggle over the quality of a piece of rare silk or a canister of precious oil. But what a contrast today! In the newspaper field alone, the daily pronouncements out of Washington, London, Paris, Rome, or Moscow reach the ends of the earth within the space of a comparatively few minutes. Such has been the magic of modern science in multiplying the power of the miraculous word. Words can be a power for good, or they can be a power for evil. No more striking example of the truth of the second part of that statement can be found than the fate of Germany in the years immediately following the end of the First World War, when it began to forsake its struggle for democracy and to turn the blandishments of Adolf Hitler. Right there. The blandishments of Adolf Hitler. Right there, the world witnessed one of the most terrifying demonstrations of the power of propaganda. In newspapers, magazines, books, pamphlets, over the air, and in motion pictures, the German people were swayed, cajoled, perverted, hardened into an evil pattern of global conquest. Force of arms followed later, but ideas preceded the first territorial annexation, the first shot of World War II. Today, the virus of materialism, of totalitarianism, of communism, of perversion of all types, is literally being forced upon us here in the United States, forced into our lives, our thoughts, our business, our homes, our families, and to an astonishing degree, it has met with a favorable reception by those in our midst who are not basically bad, but only gullible and unthinking. Those behind this drive, those doers of evil, have a purpose, a goal. All their efforts are directed toward it. All their energies spent in the cause are just so many paving stones in the road to the conquest of light by those who live in the darkness. That we have similar means at our disposal to fight for what is right is our hope, however. Yet it is a hope we must still fulfill, for up to now our efforts have been meager in comparison with those who would destroy our way of life, our freedoms, our very civilization. The writing field in America today. Conveying ideas is one of the biggest industries in America today. We are influenced by the books, magazines, newspapers, and advertisements we read, by the sounds that come over the radio from a script written in advance, by stage plays, by motion pictures, by television, by newsreels. All of these leave their imprint on us as individuals. They help influence our thoughts, mold our tastes, determine our judgments, control our actions. In radio, there have been outstanding examples of magnificent entertainment, splendid dramas, grand variety shows, brilliant musical presentations, which reflect the American public's innate good taste. And others would have a different taste, and their taste would be good taste, right? In many magazines and newspapers, in instances too numerous to mention, good writing and good honest news coverage have helped to keep these two phases of the writing field relatively free and unfettered, and a credit to our literary discrimination. But in the motion picture industry, in radio, in the book world, in magazines and in newspapers, too much that is cheap and tawdry, too much that is immoral, too much that is materialistic and profane, have caused a lowering of literary standards at a rate that is truly alarming. Now you can have the profane and materialistic and increase the literary standards at the same time. We do not expect all cream in our entertainment, but we do expect that the milk will not turn sour. Most of us, for example, do not object to an occasional story about crime. We are not prudes. Well, we should be. Nothing wrong with being prudent, you know. The very fact that the word prude is a insult is like, oh, this person tries, we are healthy-minded and decent, but we do resent a continuous and deliberate appeal to our baser instincts. We resent in current literature, on the screen, over the radio, all that is not merely subversive or obnoxious, but actually dreary, repetitious, and decidedly unentertaining, because the writers are appealing, not to most of the people, but to the few who prefer depravity and perversion. Yet, while they may be appealing to a few, the effect on the general public is so far-reaching as to amount to a national tragedy. As J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, points out, filthy literature is the great moron maker. It is casting criminals faster than prisons can absorb them. An exaggeration hardly. In an all too tragic incident illustrating the truthfulness of Mr. Hoover's statement happened not long ago in Washington, D.C., when a 14-year-old boy armed with a German pistol killed a policeman and then tried to end his own life. The boy was obsessed with stories of crime that the neighbors had refused to let their children play with him. Reporters discovered that he had stacks of gangster fiction and crime comic books hidden away, and that he saw 3 or 4 movies a week, mostly gangster films. And things got worse with the rap music and stuff. Cornered by the police, the boy was reported to have put the pistol to his head, yelling defiantly, "You'll never take me alive, coppers!" En route to the hospital, he expressed no feeling of remorse for what he had done. Instead, he was quoted as saying, "Did I kill the cop?" An American tragedy, if ever there was one, whose cause, in national terms, has been the expressed concern of many responsible men and women. Now, generally, there's the rare exceptions, and we have a big old country. The police keep things safer, and they enforce the laws that the people, have allowed to be, for the most part. Recently, the head of one of the largest bookshops in the country confessed that she was ashamed to sell many of the books published today. Even keeping them in stock, she said, seemed like cooperating in the collapse of moral values. To say that the public demands such stockpiles is only a half-truth. A short time ago, Mr. William S. Paley, chairman of the Columbia Broadcasting System, referred to the growing volume of criticism of American broadcasting, said, "First, we have an obligation to give most people what they want most of the time. Since most American people are decent-minded and decent living, if every writer, producer, and publisher were to follow Mr. Paley's statement, all forms of information and entertainment would immediately become not only interesting and highly enjoyable, but sound information and wholesome entertainment as well. Well, entertainment is how it comes in. It's not that teaching and stuff like this can't be entertainment, but you know what I mean when it becomes not devotion, not healing, it's, entertaining becomes the goal, then other stuff comes in, right? Something to do about it. There is some value, of course, in refusing to buy offensive or indecent literature, in turning off vulgar, boring, or subversive radio programs, and in abstaining from cheap movies. Well, expensive ones are often worse for one's sense of reality, right? But the cure does not lie there, for it is like objecting to bad food without providing anything better. Good cooks must replace the bad ones, and in this case, the cooks are the writers. They are the people who directly or indirectly prepare a movie or a radio script, the newsmen who talk to millions, the authors of short stories, serials, and articles, the novelists, the biographers, the playwrights, and new and better writers can be found. They will come from among you, the people of substance, of sound, healthy values, the vast group of Americans who constitute the backbone of our nation and of our Christian civilization, from among the tens of millions of you who are decent, honorable, and law-abiding. Well, long before this, the focus on the production of literature shifted to fiction over theology was the biggest at some point, and then it became, the sciences, and then fiction became the number one thing, from among the tens of millions of you who are decent, honorable, and law-abiding, you who have your feet on the ground, who are thoughtful and generous, genuine and stimulating, you Americans of every race and color can make a substantial contribution to the well-being of our country if, fortified with truth, you will go in large numbers into the writing field. It is one of the main fields in which the Christopher can work to change the world, to bring back integrity instead of untruth, individual responsibility instead of mass hypnotism, thought instead of mere sensationalism. Words are the coinage of the world of ideas. It is even more important that the words be honest than that money be honest. As the mind of the Christopher centers itself on truth, his words will take on the simplicity and clarity of his purpose. He will be an island in which words that are clear and honest shine like a beacon through the prevailing fog of doubt and illusion. In our world of mass communication, professional writing is one of the most important links joining man to man, are skillfully separating them, as do the godless, by planting doubt and hate. In the field of professional working, the Christ-bearer can find a wide scope for his or her work, provided, of course, that he or she has the talent for it, and that talent, incidentally, is much more generously distributed than most people realize. We of the Christopher movement know from experience that this is so, and it is of no use to protest as some few do. Perhaps you're right, but they still don't want worthwhile people in the writing field. That is neither fair nor accurate. Well, whichever ones are helping them get out their agenda, right? Are the ones that they're going to put in. But, you don't have to be, whether or not you think that Jesus is with you doesn't, isn't the determinative of whether you're godless or godly. But of course, this is a Catholic book, so yeah. Many with godless leanings have succeeded in infiltrating the writing sphere, of course, and have secured editorial and executive positions. To this group, also, can be added secretaries and readers of manuscripts who make every effort to keep good, healthy literature works from reaching the proper authorities. Seldom, however, do these godless aim for the top jobs in the writing field. They find it more to their advantage in poisoning the minds of the people to have genuinely respected men and women at the head of the publishing concerns, people who unwittingly serve as fronts for their behind-the-scenes activities. And I would think that a lot of Christian publishing and stuff like that, it seems, do these people really believe in what they're pushing, or is they just selling what they think is going to sell the most to the Christian audience? In contrast to these godless, there is, fortunately, a far greater number of sound, sensible Americans who still hold similar posts, and these men and women definitely do want good material to be submitted for publication. Multiply their number, particularly of those who are articulate in supporting their beliefs, and the whole trend toward materialism in this field can not only be stopped, but changed for the better. An editor of a motion picture magazine recently remarked, "In my opinion, it is the failure to realize the message of interest and value they have for the modern world that keep the majority of potential writers away from successful writing." And a few months ago, the editor of a leading house which publishes pulps of wide distribution and low quality remarked, "We want stories of better quality, but we find that too few better quality people are interested in writing. In Hollywood alone, one major studio found only 6 manuscripts out of 200 submitted to possess screen possibilities, and these 6 were reported as none too good themselves. So the opportunity and the need for new writers with good ideas are there, apart from the numerous possibilities in screen and radio writing. In the publishing end of the field alone, there is scope enough for everyone with sufficient talent and perseverance to make a place for himself or herself. According to a recent survey, roughly 2,000 magazines are printed and distributed throughout the United States each month, and this total does not include trade periodicals, house organs, and others of strictly limited circulation. Of this 2,000, the first 130 magazines have a combined circulation of more than 200 million copies each month. This means more than one magazine for every man, woman, and child in this country. In just 5 classes of publications alone, there are circulated 3,223,000 detective story magazines, 9,263,000 love and adventure pulps, 7,976,000 true confession magazines, 10,755,000 movie magazines, 25,215,000 adventure or comic books. Certain laws of writing. We do not claim that a person of substance and integrity can sell to these magazines after 10 easy lessons. Let's make that clear. There are certain laws of writing. The fundamental principles may be learned with comparative ease, but each branch of literature has its own special rules. It takes years, said one of the nation's top writers, to learn the wisdom to acquire the experience that a writer must have. As far as the craft goes, you never learn it. Each piece of writing presents its own original problem of craftsmanship. Not every violinist can be a Heifetz or Chrysler, but there are plenty of places for musicians outside the concert stage. Most of us want to start out as vice presidents when we should be content to begin as office boys. There is room for thousands of good writers. Out of these thousands, it is certain that a few will rise to the top of their professions, as cream rises to the top of milk. But famous to be or not, everyone counts. Which branch of writing shall it be? Some of you will find your particular talents better suited to one type of writing than another. Some of you will like to work only with facts, others with imagined situations that are dreamed up in the language of the trade. In other words, there are 2 main divisions to which all writing belongs: fiction and nonfiction. The former deals with invented circumstances, like those in stories and fantasies. The latter deals with facts or alleged facts or interpretation of facts. Of the two, the latter is more simple and a more direct way of putting over an idea, of selling a thought, of proving a point. But it does not follow that nonfiction is the only method or even the most effective. Fiction, because it is more subtle, can often be more potent. Fiction, and in a more restricted sense, nonfiction as well, can again be broken down into two further categories: stories, articles, features, columns, or editorials. With the moral and just plain stories. In the first instance, a novel, short story, or article is clearly intended to convey some purposeful thought. As such, the writing very directly affects public thought. In the latter case, however, the object is simply entertainment or amusement, or perhaps the building up of excitement, whether it be pleasant or stimulating, or too often, unfortunately, horrifying. For one who has a purpose, a good purpose, in short, a Christopher, the following branch of the writing field offers a tremendous opportunity to spread light where there is darkness, to furnish entertainment as refreshing as it is wholesome. First, there is the world of newspapers. In motion pictures, over the radio, and feature stories, much of the emphasis on the news we get and the people who prepare it has been dramatized along big lines. Film, magazine, and radio heroes are nearly always star reporters, columnists, press executives, or managing editors. Always they are alert, aggressive, very much on the ball. In most cases this is true and only serves to point up the fact that, in the press field, as in other phases of writing, specialization by trained experts is the rule rather than the exception. To break into the newspaper field, the question of age is a vital factor. To learn the trade, you will have to start at the bottom of the ladder and work up. Managing editors and feature columnists and city deskmen don't like little Topsy. Just grow. They have to start out as copy boys, or cub reporters, or secretaries. Newspapers want young men and women to train, because the training takes some years to complete. Yet, the newspaper field does offer inexhaustible opportunities, even to the more mature, since the number of metropolitan dailies is very small when placed alongside the total number of newspapers of all kinds published in this country. There are, at the moment, nearly 2,000 dailies and some 15,000 weekly newspapers. There are the small town and country weeklies, county weeklies. There are the newspapers put out by occupational groups, by those interested in the theater, advertising, hardware, men's and women's clothing, or by the trade unions and social welfare, fraternal and religious groups. And in these latter fields, there are great opportunities for the beginning or semi-professional writer. Breaking them down systematically, there are the national publications put out by such groups as veterans organizations, by national and international trade unions, by business associations, by fraternal orders, by church and religious groups, by women's societies, by political parties. The parallel publications by state and county organizations of groups similar to the above. The local periodicals, sometimes put out for one company, one plant, one veterans post, one chapter of a society, one church, one small community. These publications are of a dual character. Some are addressed to the public at large. Others are what are commonly referred to as house organs. These latter have a limited reading public, since they are intended only for the members of a particular organization, for the people employed in a particular plant, or for the adherents of some religious business or political group. These periodicals are not listed in any of the usual press directories, yet their circulation runs into the millions. They spring up spontaneously wherever a group of people with a common background or objective get together. And these house organs wield unbelievable power. Their readers will often give their editorials more attention than they will the editorials of the metropolitan press. That they should do so is quite understandable, since these small publications represent an interest that is direct and personal. Speaking of these house organs, some in this group are newspapers, others are magazines, but for practical purposes, we list them here in the general press field. An active Christopher who edits a periodical published by a large corporation wrote, "Most of the big companies put out industrial publications, and more of them are going into it. A few years ago, there were 5,000 industrial periodicals on record, but the number has grown a lot since then. It is this field that I think offers the greatest opportunity for doing good. The circulation of employee magazines is particularly important because so many of the mill and factory workers who read them read very little else. Big companies are willing to spend a lot of money on them to promote good industrial relations, lessen friction, get a bigger return on their wage dollar. The editors are about evenly divided between women and men, with most of the big magazines edited by men, but a lot of important ones also handled by women. The average editor's pay varies from $2,500 to $6,000, but the large publications go all the way up. However, other angles to the job are more important than pay. For one thing, the editor and his staff act as go-betweens for management and labor. They go around the mills and factories, talking to the workers, and get a lot of valuable sidelights on how they feel about things. And they are also pretty close to the top management of their company, because they have to know the inside story on company policies to be able to interpret them correctly in what they write. For these reasons, they have a good chance of taking leading parts in employee relations problems. As far as the qualifications for the jobs are concerned, a good knowledge of English and an understanding of human nature are the chief requirements. You have to like people and have a real respect for the people you were writing for, or at least act like it, right? If editors think they are different kinds of human beings from the workers, then they'll never be good editors. Most editors have assistants, and an inexperienced person may start in at that position while getting experience. Some colleges give courses in industrial journalism that are wonderful foundations for the job, but that training is not half as important as being the right kind of person. In short, the employee magazine can have a good deal of influence on a lot of people, and that is why I think the field is a natural for Christophers, a good one for people of high principles to get into. Everything this editor writes is only true, yet it must be added that not in all cases will such publications offer a full-time job. Sometimes they will pay for part-time work, especially where the publication comes out monthly or bi-monthly or even quarterly. Frequently, the publication will be issued by a voluntary worker. More often than not, the person chosen is the one who volunteers. This point cannot be emphasized too strongly. In clubs and factories, in student, veteran, employer, employee, fraternal, religious, and community organizations, it is possible for one alert person to propose the issuance of a publication and then to handle the publication himself. The audience may be small, but it is intimate, tied together by common interests. If every person with good ideas and in a position to do so takes over a little responsibility in the conduct of these organs, he will end by helping to shape the habits of tens of millions. Closely related to the field of newspapers is that of magazines. What has been said of newspapers is equally true of magazines. There are in the United States literally thousands of such publications. Periodically, there are lists published of all these magazines with statements on the kind of material they want and the prices they pay. Such lists can be found in special writers' journals on almost every newsstand. I don't know if that's currently true. Roughly, magazines are broken down into the slicks, the semi-slicks, and the pulps. A slick is a magazine conspicuous for its glossy or coated paper, its expensive art, its nationally known writer contributors, it's top-grade advertising. A semi-slick is a periodical which follows fairly closely to the style and format of a slick, but which does not quite duplicate the expensive layout, does not have as many big-name writers, and uses less elaborate advertising. A pulp is a magazine which uses a low grade of paper, has less top-grade advertising, features quite often a garish cover display, and uses story or article material by writers, other than those in the top brackets. And sometimes the pulp is the best magazine. The high slick is the one that's most likely to have filler, right? For every one of the slick or semi-slick magazines, however, there are dozens of pulps, and among the readers of the latter are precisely the people who should be reached by wholesome, positive, and creative ideas, by Christophers who can turn their heads to perform a great service to society without impairing the interest in the material they write. To sell to any of these three branches of the magazine field requires a reasonable amount of technical knowledge of the writing craft, of course. It requires a painstaking study of the type of writing each periodical regularly features. It involves, if possible, the placing of your material in the hands of a reputable agent who will know far better than you where a particular story or article should be sent, and can advise you how to smarten up your material or change the format to suit editorial needs. If a writer has never sold to any great degree, even the most reputable agents charge what is known as a reading fee. This is done to pay for the time and energy spent by an agent or a staff in analyzing the possibilities of a particular story or article, since there is no guarantee that such a story or article will be suitable for publication. Once you begin to sell regularly, however, and you can sell if you have a certain amount of talent and a somewhat greater amount of perseverance. The reading fee will be dropped and a percentage basis arrangement made between the agent and the author. 2,500 editors throughout the country are searching for new material. 1,000 Christophers with a purpose can supply that demand. In the past few years, there has sprung up an entirely new type of publication known as the comics. By a comic is not meant something necessarily funny, although the cartoon strips which composed them were originally intended to be humorous. Modern comics can be quite serious. An increasing number of feature crime or adventure stories. A lesser number are aimed at direct education to the reader. Labor unions and religious groups publish comic books whose purpose is as serious as life itself, and this medium has been chosen because it reaches a section of the population which is able to follow a presentation much more easily if it puts forth an illustration